Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Gerardo Poli.
And this, sorry. Okay.
One of the best bits of advice I've ever received was to find good mentors and to learn from them. Trusted people who have already done what you're trying to do now. I've been fortunate throughout my career to have some fantastic mentors to help guide me, but I realized that they'd be hard to find and also hard to commit the time to one. This is why we've gathered some of the best minds from the veterinary world and squeezed them for their wisdom so that you don't have to learn the hard way.
With the help of our guests, we flip the veterinary profession on its back and explore its soft underbelly to find the tips, tools, and inspiration that you'll need to build the career that you've always wanted.
I'm Gerardo Poli.
I'm Hubert Hemstra, and this is the Vet Vault. Our guest for today's episode first crossed my radar when he was a keynote speaker at a vet conference that I attended earlier this year, and I knew immediately that I wanted to hear more about what he had to say. He has a message that resonated strongly with me personally, and with his entire audience of vets that day. It's a message that we here at the Vet Vault think is very valuable to all of you, our listeners. So we were very pleased when he agreed to spend some time with us.
Nigel Marsh is a marketing consultant, communication specialist, author, and entrepreneur. He is best known for his creative pursuits, as well as being the author of 3 books, Fat, 40 and Fired, Overworked and Underlaid, and Fit, 50 and Fired Up. He is also known as the co-founder of Earth Hour and the founder of the Sydney Skinny. Fat, 40 and Fired is currently being developed into a major TV series.
And if you enjoy listening to him today on our podcast, make sure to look up his own very popular podcast called The 5 of My Life. I'm not going to lie, my wife prefers listening to Nigel's podcast than to the Vet Vault. The other side to Nigel's career is his 30 plus years experience in the commercial sector. Over that time, Nigel has worked with a huge variety of organizations. From the highest profile, like McDonald's, Canon, Pepsi, Virgin, just to name a few, to national governments and local enterprises. Whether dealing with big business issues or social engineering, Nigel has provided strategic counsel and impressive results in almost every category imaginable. Highly in demand as a public speaker, Nigel travels the globe, regularly giving speeches to major corporations on both his business and personal views. His TED speech on work-life balance remains the most viewed ever given outside of America, with well over 4 million hits.
And this, dear listeners, is why we are talking to Nigel on our veterinary podcast. Because us vets are not always great at finding that elusive work-life balance. We've had some interesting discussions with other guests on this podcast on this topic. What is work-life balance? Does it even exist? And is it something that we should be pursuing? So we've called in the big guns. Please join us in this highly insightful discussion all about work-life balance with one of the leading thinkers on this topic, Nigel Marsh.
So Nigel, I told you in our correspondence before we started this podcast, me and Gerardo sent a questionnaire to a couple of hundreds of vets and vet students to ask them what their concerns were and what they wanted to talk about in the podcast. And one of the most common recurring themes that we heard was that they were worried about work-life balance, how they're going to have a good work-life balance in this profession of ours that is notorious for burnout and for being quite all-consuming, which is why we wanted to talk to you today. One of the many hats that you wear is the work-life balance guy. Now, first off, can you tell us how did that happen? How did it happen that you became the guru on work-life balance?
Well, I wouldn't claim any special place for me, but it was an accident, and it's just a result of my own personal experience. So I'm not a vet, but I was working in quite a high-pressured profession, and I had a change of life where I literally changed my life in every way. I mean, I'm not saying it was easy, but just to keep it short for this conversation. So I, gave up drink and lost weight and got fit. And one of the things I did was absolutely put the things that were important to me at the centre of my life rather than at the edge. And ever since I've turned 40, I'm now 55, I have had a balanced existence. And we can come on later to talk about how you define that. But my work-life balance before 40 was rubbish, and my work-life balance after it has been fantastic. And a friend asked me to do a TED speech, so I did, and it was on that topic, and lots of people saw that. I don't know, it's 5 million or whatever at the moment. And then because of that, people then ask me, to talk about it. But I do lots of speeches, and 90% of them aren't about work-life balance. But because some of my books, reference my journey and all those things, is nice people like yourselves and like your colleagues in America asked me to come over and talk about work-life balance. So I wouldn't want to claim to be an expert, but I have got views on it.
Views are important.
Views, yeah. So what does work-life balance mean for you?
Gosh, mean for me personally, or me thinking what it means generally?
Oh, actually, that's a really good question. I suppose maybe go both. What does it mean generally, and then if there's a different way or different thought that you have on it, explain kind of what it means for you.
Sure. Well, so I hate the phrase, and I think the phrase is hideously unhelpful and misleading. And what people can be led to believe is they have to balance equal amounts of time on work and equal amounts of time on play. And it suggests that work is a bad thing, and if you do more of one, you do less of the other. So just the whole phrase is rubbish and problematic, but it's the one that people use. So for me, generically, it means finding a life that you find meaningful.
Okay.
And that then leads to a whole different conversation, because if you have work-life balance, you get into idiotic discussions about getting up early and doing yoga and drinking green smoothie and whatever else. Knock yourself out if that's what you want to do. But you get unqualified, poorly trained, maybe well-intentioned, who knows, people giving advice that they're not qualified to do. So I wouldn't dream of giving you advice on how to have balance. I don't know you. There's as many different answers as there are human beings. But if I look at it in terms of how to construct a life that you find meaningful, there might be some suggestions for thought.
Okay, don't leave us hanging. What are your suggestions and thoughts on that?
It's not about spending equal time on the golf courses in the vet surgery. You say, how can you have a life, construct a life that has meaning? Then by definition, that puts the onus on the individual. You go, well, what is meaningful to you? So you might have somebody who, I don't know, Rupert Murdoch or whoever the richest vet in the world is, who, if they have consciously thought about it, and what they want to do is they want to win and have a bigger practice than anyone else and die with more money than anyone else, and that's genuinely what they want, well, knock yourself out. He or she is having a life of meaning. Fantastic. If they might have married someone, had a few children, have a friendship circle, and that's what's really important to them, then the period of proper reflection, not trying to copy someone else or do something that you think other people are going to applaud you for, which is two of the really big problems I see in this area. You are allowed to be different. You should be different. So it's about, one of my phrases is decide, don't slide. So just think about what's important to you. And many people don't do this proper reflection until something awful happens to them, which is sort of what happened to me. I mean, I wasn't clever enough to do this, on my own. I had to lose, my first book's called Fat, 40 and Fired. I was fat, 40 and fired. So I had a bit of a life, event that made me pause and think. And I didn't want the second half of my life to be a pale imitation of the first half. I thought, hold on, I need to sort some stuff out. And I can't blame my profession or the government or my employer. Grow up, be an adult, take responsibility of yourself, and think about it doesn't mean you can have everything you want in life, but actually think about what you might like. Because many people fall into an existence and then they wake up and they're 63, they've been divorced twice, they don't know any of their children's friends, and they think, well, what the hell was that for? And I go, well, that's a real shame, which is completely different to tips and tricks on how to run your day.
It's interesting to hear you say that about there being a push to change. It was one of the questions I wanted to ask you. I noticed from your book, well, I read both of your books, and in both events where you decided to take that break and reevaluate your life, there was a definite push. And I do get the impression that most of us are so comfortable in our little ruts and that we just plod along and do the same thing until something major happens, until somebody that you love gets sick or something like that. And then people suddenly take a step back and go, okay, well, what should I do differently? Have you got any insights on how can you generate that push without waiting for a crisis? How do you get yourself in the frame of mind, or how do you start that process of serious reevaluation without waiting for the external push?
What a fabulous question. Well, I mean, I don't want to appear arrogant. This is genuine. That is why I do the speech that you were in Perth. Yep. And that's why I did the speech to your colleagues in Texas. Mm-hmm. It's really, really hard because we've all got responsibilities and life is busy and uncertain. And I find it an absolute privilege and an honor if I'm asked to talk about this, because my intent, when I was talking to your colleagues in Perth, my intent was the answer to your question. You go, I don't know how I can make people do it, but sometimes I get asked to talk to people about that topic. So you go, right, so my intent of that speech, apart from being entertaining, is to make a few of your colleagues walk away and go, blimey, that man's made me think. And if I can be the stimulus rather than a divorce or a cancer diagnosis, then I'm extremely happy. Beyond, doing speaking work and standing on stage and asking people to do it, I don't know. I mean, write books, but I don't view it as my life's mission. But if I'm in a conversation about it, that is what I'm trying to do, is to get, not to give them the answer, not to tell them time management tricks, but to say, this isn't a joke. You're only here once. We're all heading to a hole in the ground. No one gets out alive. I mean, I can see this picture, your picture on the computer. You look like you've got about 40 or 50 years left before you cark it. You go, how are you going to use those years? And be the stimulus that maybe, I mean, hopefully you guys have already thought about it, but be the stimulus that makes people go, blimey, he asked me some confronting questions. Perhaps I should have a think. It's not about the person with the most money when she dies wins.
You said before that you think work-life balance is a phrase and it's and you don't like it. I personally don't like it either, because there are many things that I do during the day at different times of the day, and working on different projects. But in a way, I don't feel like I'm working. I feel like as if I work on, or I'm spending time on my hobbies, spending on time on my projects that I'm engaged in, and so forth. And I often get asked, how do I do work-life balance? Because people see the amount of output that I can do. And I suppose for me, I couldn't answer the question, because whichever way I had explained it, it didn't even sound like as if I had balance. So then I thought about it, and I was like, well, the stuff that I'm doing actually is stuff that I really like doing, and I shouldn't feel like as if I had to justify it. But if I really felt like as if I wasn't really working, then maybe this is what work-life balance means for me. I've been sort of floating around with this thing in my head for 6 months, or if not longer, about whether or not the fact that I feel like I have to justify what work-life balance means for me. Maybe just actually disliked the whole entire phrase, but I didn't know whether or not that was me just trying to make an excuse for what I do, as opposed to actually whether or not it is, a meaningful phrase. And my take on it is, or at least my thought of or concern around the phrase, and you've said this as well to some degree, is that when people are looking for it, in an employer. So when we ask people, what is it they're looking for? They're looking for work-life balance.
half of them don't even know what it means for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they put the responsibility on their employer or on their family or on their partner to somehow be responsible for their work-life balance when they actually don't know what it means for them because they haven't identified what is most important for them in their lives.
Oh, Gerardo, we are brothers from another mother. I couldn't agree more. And I would go a step further. So the phrase is rubbish and actively damaging. But there's also another nuance, which, listening to you describe your situation, I think might help you not feel guilty, which is the objective isn't balance. Just like the objective of life isn't happiness, it's to make a contribution. The objective of life isn't balance, it's meaning. So I couldn't care less about balance. Who invented balance? I mean, I don't care, right? So if you find your life meaningful, and you yourself said, which is really important, as long as you're not deluding yourself, so I've got no idea about your personal circumstances, but just pretend you've got a wife who feels neglected and you're never there.
Actually, my partner's like, I love it that you give me the space and time to do my projects. I'm like, oh, I love the space and time for me to do my project. Sorry, Nigel, continue.
Yeah. So it's important that people aren't delusional and you're not harming other people. So you've done the work and you've thought about it. But if I take what you say on face value, which I do, you go, brilliant. I mean, who gives a toss about balance? Balance is irrelevant. It's only important if it's a problem. Does that make sense? So if you've got an overworked vet, her relationships are failing because she's spending 23 hours in the office, and that is a problem for her because she doesn't want to live like that. The objective isn't to get her balance, it's to get her meaning. And by getting meaning, well, then balance becomes a non-issue. Does that make sense? You go, well, for your life, meaning isn't spending 23 hours examining dogs and cats. It's looking after your mother and your children and whatever else. So therefore, you need to reorganize how your life works. Not you need to balance all the different elements. People, you need to turn the telescope around. Balance is not, it's the wrong pot of gold. Meaning is the pot of gold. I know some of the happiest people I know work the hardest, and they're genuinely happy, and I wouldn't want them to work any less hard. Other people, it's all individual, they should work less hard. They hate their job and their relationships are failing and they're miserable in that. But it's the height of arrogance to give an off-the-shelf answer to everybody. It's what works for you.
What's your thoughts around people who, we always say, and you read books and they say the only thing you can control is your own actions and thoughts and things, right? But let's say you're in a situation and you're in a job and the job pays for you and that pays for you and your family is dependent on that and your children are dependent and so forth. The concept of changing what you're doing and the change how would you say the meaning that it has for you. So in a way, let's say the way you currently think about being a veterinarian is going to the clinic and administering vaccinations and talking about things that owners don't do, and then go home and every day you do the same thing and feel like you don't have an impact. You're not contributing. But then if you reframe what it is that you do in your job, where you're you're helping clients take care of their pets, you are improving the health and welfare of animals, where that was the role that I suppose the oath that you took somewhat when you took on this job. But you rediscover meaning in something that you're doing as opposed to looking outside for new meaning. What's your thoughts around that?
You broke up a little bit there, but I think I got most of that. So you can, I think it's a really wise comment. You can reframe things. So I work very hard on my own podcast, but I don't think of it as work. So it's not like I'm out of balance. I love it. The more I do, the better. But I also think there are a number of charlatans where they, it's a bit like religion is the opium of the people, back in the previous century. It's where you go, you've got a bunch of people in horrible jobs who don't like it. and you say, oh gosh, just change your mindset, and positive thinking will change everything. So I'm a huge believer in positive thinking and reframing your perspective on stuff. But having said that, one of the things that I say that most other people don't, and I started my TED speech with this, is there are some jobs and life objectives that just are incompatible. So sometimes you have to change your external circumstances. Now, we can't all have everything we want in life. So that's, if you ask me, how can you do it? Well, some people, it's tough, it's hard, but just pretend you don't like blood. You probably shouldn't be a doctor. If you don't like heights, you probably shouldn't be a pilot. If you don't like long distance travel, you probably shouldn't be a lorry driver. So just pretend that each category of work, if you don't like numbers, you shouldn't be a hedge fund manager. So for me, it's important to be honest with the situation you're in. So some situations you can resolve by saying, well, change how you look at it. And that's lovely. You go, stop being down on what a vet's got to do. It's a wonderful thing. You're helping people, you're helping animals, isn't it great? But other people, they might be in the wrong job. If being a vet will involve, you tell me, I don't know, will involve certain things that you cannot change. Just like I've changed my job. You go, because I know what it involves to be the CEO of a large international company. Nothing wrong with that, but I'm sure as hell not going to be at the beach at 3:30 in the afternoon if I'm, doing that certain job. So you've got to be honest with what, running a veterinarian practice means, and then overlay on whether you can come to a place of happiness with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we tackle.
You said yeah in a way that suggested no.
No, totally. There has to be underlying compatibilities with what you want to do, the impact you want to have, and I suppose then it maybe redirects the question to the issue with people being passionate about things and believing that passion should continue forever, I suppose. In a way that, like, I've heard veterinarians go, I'm not passionate about the job anymore. I'm not passionate about, it's not what I thought it was going to be. Well, actually, that's a different phrase. Sorry, but like in terms of they rely on passion for something to continue the drive and fire to push through, and continue on and persevere with their careers or their chosen careers. I do believe you get to a stage where you have to think long and hard about whether or not your direction aligns in, or is heading in the same direction you wanted, that you foresee what you would like your life to be. But the issue that I hear, or the issue that I believe, is that when people rely too much on passion to drive their motivation, that they become disheartened relatively quickly, because passion doesn't last forever. And looking for meaning and reframing is possibly one way around that. Do you come across that passion issue, or do you feel that it's an issue at all?
Yeah, so there's a phrase it's a Buddhist phrase which I just love, which is chop wood, carry water. That's what you do before enlightenment. And what do you do after enlightenment?
Chop wood, carry water.
That's it. And so it's about sort of managing expectations. So I'm finding it difficult to disagree with anything you say, Geraldo. It is if you think you're always going to be on top of the mountain, you are deluded. That's not what life is about. You've got to be able to. There's a quote from the Russian playwright Chekhov, which is, any fool can face a crisis. It's day-to-day living that's the challenge. If you change crisis to passion, any fool can be excited about something that's genuinely exciting. But how are you going on Tuesday and Wednesday? A normal Tuesday and Wednesday, when you're not saving a life and someone's hugging you for saving their dog, can you, it's called being an adult, this has got nothing to do with balance, is, can you come to a place where most of us will have to work for 40, 50 years, and it's not all going to be party hats and celebrations. And one of the ways that I would suggest to friends and colleagues that they can help themselves with that is, if you think your business has a point. And so I can say this to you two because you're vets, which is good, but it's quite challenging in certain other industries. If essentially what you're doing, so like my daughter's trained to be a nurse, so essentially that's a good profession. And the point of it is making sick people well. So if she has a bad Tuesday or Wednesday, you can fall back on, but the overall endeavour is making the world a slightly better place. It's meaningful. So if you, for me, it's managing your expectations. Life isn't going to be one long orgasm. What is it that you are doing? Even something as ridiculous as doing a podcast, like my podcast. You go, well, I hope it entertains people and makes their plane journeys less boring. So if I can't find the point, then that is really, really hard. And this is what happens to some people who are just commercially driven, which is fine. So they work, just pretend it's banking. They work in banking, and they got over having enough money. So they've got enough money, and then they're having a bad day. There's nothing left to fall back on. Does that make sense? You go, so my initial motivation was whatever it was, pay off the mortgage or blah, blah, blah. Well, I've done that. And I don't really like my job, and it's very, very stressful. And so I go, well, you don't really like your job and it's very stressful. I haven't got an easy answer for you. I mean, I just haven't. You go, well, you're in a not very likable job and it's stressful. And then, how do you overlay meaning on that? So it's for each of us to work out. And I have to say, I have never seen a situation that can't be improved ever. And I've been doing this for like 15 years.
I'm going to offer an opinion here on our profession, though. I think a challenge in what we call people trying to find work-life balance in our profession. So, Gerardo, if you say you have people who apply for jobs and they say they want work-life balance, I don't think there's a big issue, as you say, Nigel, in our profession with finding meaning in the work that you do. I think the challenge comes that it's too much of it for a lot of people. Our profession and the jobs that are out there will lend themselves to long days that take you away from the other things that give you meaning in your life. So, for example, I'll use my wife as an example. She's a vet as well. She finds it very hard to take a normal job in practice because the standard work hours are 8 a.m. till 7 o'clock at night, and we have 3 young children, and that's not balanced for her. She can't do that. And we're fortunate, I'm fortunate, and both of you are fortunate in that you're in positions in your life where you are in some control over what you do with your time. So you can allocate it to the meaning that you want. Whereas many people are, if you want this job, then these are the hours you're going to work. And if you don't like it, then you don't have this job, but then you don't have any money. So I think I don't know if it's a question rather than just a statement of the challenges that people face. I'll turn that into a question. Nigel, in your book, you made the decision to jump off the hamster wheel and to reevaluate your life and to build yourself a meaningful life. But it did mean that you had to be prepared to take that financial risk. And I think that is often a stumbling block for many people, that they know they want something different, but the practical implications of having to pay the bills will often get in the way. How have you got any thoughts on that? How do you get around that? How do you deal with that? The fear of taking that leap to make a change.
Well, I think it's probably the most important issue that you have raised, which I call the reality of the category syndrome. So it's what I was talking about earlier about if you don't like blood, don't be a doctor or whatever else. Is to have a clear-eyed view of what is the realistic best version of what your job actually. Talk about your wife. She's got 3 young kids. You've got 3 young kids, and the hours are 7 till 8. So just pretend that is the reality of the category. That is what her job will mean. You go, brilliant. That is the starting point. Don't try and pretend that you're going to change the reality of what being a pilot or a lorry driver or a vet actually means. Have a clear-eyed view of it. Then you go, if this is the only way I can make a living, there's no other option, well, then you haven't got any bloody choice. But what my work has led me to believe is that in many, many cases, that is merely the philosophy of despair. And if you were to ask me 1 year before Fat 40 and Fired, and before, if we had this conversation before I'd done the things I've done over the last 15 years, I would say, you don't understand. I've got 4 kids. This is the only way I can make a living. And I would passionately have believed that. Yet that was not true. So what people say is, well, it's all right for you, clever clogs, because you went off and did X, Y, and Z. I've got no other option.
Yeah.
I just don't believe that's true. I just don't believe that's true. You get a lawyer who says, "Oh, this is absolutely appalling, but this is the only way I can make a living." You go, really? Is it? Have you tried? Have you looked? Or is it just extraordinarily scary looking at doing something else? There's a difference between something being really scary and it not being possible. And what many of us do is we peek over the edge and we look at how uncertain and scary that is, and therefore we then rule it out. So just pretend we let's not use your wife as an example, but let's pretend we've got a lady who wants to be an engaged mother and doesn't think that being a vet, will enable her to do that. But being a vet is the only way she can earn a living. Without knowing this person, because I've just invented her, I would say, well, I'd like to challenge that assumption. So to just pretend I was in a coaching relationship with her, I would find out genuinely about her life and go, is that the case? And as I said before, I've never seen a situation that can't be. I wasn't sure if you were stunned by my wisdom.
I think
I was waiting for the mic drop. Then that was, and then the internet connection cut out a bit. We're going to stop our video.
Nigel, our internet is a bit so we keep dropping out a little bit. I'm going to stop our video. We are still here, but hopefully that will give us some more buffering. So we disappearing off the screen, but we are still here.
So that is far worse, because I've got a grinning, idiotic picture of you carrying a surfboard.
That's
what I'm seeing in reality right now.
That photo is, to me, that's work-life balance.
I wish I could unsee it. It's burned into my brain. Can I tell you guys a story when I was talking to, it was actually the equine practitioners in America. Because I haven't got the answers, but I genuinely would like to help. If asked, only if I don't force myself into conferences. If I get asked, then I give my honest opinion. And I'm talking to these wonderful people. And if you are an equine practitioner in the States, it involves, the horses don't come to the practice. You've got to go to the horse because they're big animals, and you get called out late at night. So if someone calls you at 2:30, you've got to drive, maybe through the rain for 100 kilometers to go and euthanize a horse or whatever. So the fact that you're on call means, that you, in terms of how classically people talk about balance, you might have absolutely no balance because every night is interrupted by a call that means you've got to jump into your van. Now, talking to these people about that, so that's the category reality is you've got to be on call to drive somewhere to look after a horse, and you go, and there's no choice. And just challenging assumptions. You go, that's the philosophy of despair. You go, okay, well, I don't know anything, but I'm just going to ask a question. Could you share the nighttime calls duty, being on call, with the practice that's next door to you? And this lovely person looked at me and went, yes, I could, but I would earn less money. There's nothing I can do. And then with 2 minutes of questioning, you go, well, there is something. We just discovered something that you can do. Oh, yes, but it means I might earn less money. You go, well, if people are up, this is where sometimes the debate, you're after nothing changing, but you having everything you want. You might have been born in the wrong century. That's not really how life works. But if the balance and the sleep is really genuinely valuable to you, maybe it's worth considering the drop in income that having, this is not you, this is those people over there, you having 2 nights where you aren't on call. Yeah. Does that make sense?
I couldn't agree more.
So if the question is, how can I have exactly what I want without anything changing and having perfect balance in the old way that people define balance? You go, I'm not really interested in that question because it's a bit of a juvenile one. If it is, how can I genuinely on earth in real life have a meaningful existence where I contribute and I have a sense of, meaning? I'm very interested in that question. And as I said, I'm yet to find a situation where there isn't something we can do to make it better.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, Nigel. That's kind of what I think why I asked the question. Gerardo?
Why you looking at me for at the moment?
Sorry.
I totally believe that something's got to give, and it's a matter of someone asking questions, and it's helpful when someone else asks you the questions, because you can't somehow seem to ask the questions yourself. When you do get stuck, and you're biased by the confines of your limitations right now. But it's until someone actually goes like, is that real? Is it actually possible? Like, what is, if you could have anything and there was no limitations, what would that look like? And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, and then you can reverse engineer that. So I think it's quite powerful what you're saying, Nigel, in the fact that it's helpful to have someone, or at least you found that when you're able to ask those questions to people, they really do see that actually there is things that they can do.
Okay, can I raise another point, guys? Where if everyone in every industry says what success looks like is working really, 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 really hard all the time without thinking about it, and having time for yourself and having a enjoyable, I'm struggling to find a word other than balance, but enjoyable me time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If that's shameful or guilty, and that's what everyone in positions of power and seniority in your industry, that's the behavior and the attitude that they model, then we are just perpetuating and making worse a bad situation.
Yeah.
So society changes, and people who are successful have, I think, a responsibility to nudge things in the right direction. So in England, where I was born, 150 years ago, we used to put 8-year-old children down mines because they could fit through smaller holes. Mm-hmm. And that's true, they can. and so it wasn't that clever. And you go, well, it was clever, but we don't really want to live like that. Because an 8-year-old kid should be playing in the garden, not down a mine. Yeah. So, my headmistress at my twin girls' school was back at work 8 hours after she gave birth to a child. And she was back at work because she wanted to be a role model for the girls.
Yes.
Now, I wanted to kill myself when I heard that. Because I know what you're trying to do, sweetheart, but you're a moron.
Yeah.
You are doing the very, very worst thing. Can you imagine if you were the geography teacher in that school and you were thinking of having a baby? You think, bloody hell, I was hoping to have 6 months off. Apparently, I'm only allowed 9 hours. Yeah. So for the people who have cracked it, Hubert, you shouldn't be embarrassed with your stupid surfing photo. You should be proud of it. You go, actually, I'm a successful vet and I go surfing. Now, I don't mean bragging with your wonderful life, but it's so wonderful when I see, and I work with lots of very successful CEOs, and most of them are rattled, but the ones who are the most successful actually do have balance in the way that people use it. They have got happy marriages, and they do know their kids, and they have got friends, and they do enjoy their life. And you go, so it is possible then? You go, yes, it bloody is. You can have it all. I'm here to tell you, you can have it all. Not all on the Tuesday and all on the Wednesday. Can have a meaningful life. The philosophy that is, you've got to have a career that leads to a lonely old age full of regret. The philosophy that you've got to you've got to ruin your health to build wealth, so then you can spend your wealth to repair your health in your old age. Society's gone mad. It needs conversations where you go, we're only here for 80 years. How are you going to use those years on this planet? And guess what? There are a whole bunch of very, very successful people in every endeavor, including being a vet, who have got meaningful lives. And if we have to overlay meaningful lives to mean idiotic daily balance as per Cosmopolitan magazine, I'm just not interested in the conversation. But there are people, you will know, very, very happy, successful vets.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I love your story about the principal. But at the same conference that I saw you speak, Nigel, I went to a talk of a researcher from the UK. They did research on the veterinary profession, and the topic was, why do vets leave the profession? And one of the three main reasons was that they felt that they didn't belong in this profession because they look at their employers and at the business owners and at their lack of, well, let's call it balance, the way they always they're early and they leave late and they don't take holidays, and the young vets go, oh, that's not for me, I'm not that person. If that's the expectation, then I'm out. Whereas I think on the flip side, those owners and bosses think, well, I need to, as you say, I need to model how it should be. I need to be the first one in and the last one out. That's my responsibility as a boss, and that will inspire my vets to work hard. And actually, what they're doing is they're actually demotivating the veterinarians.
I used to work with the CEO of Microsoft, who would leave early on a Friday, every Friday, and wouldn't respond to emails over the weekend.
Yeah.
And she deliberately do that for the reverse reason of the reason you just said. She wanted to model, not this is what you do, you've got to be the first in, the first out. She goes, no, I'm leaving. I'm leaving first. Yeah. I'm not the last to leave. I'm the first to leave. And she wouldn't say, because I've got to go to the doctor's appointment. I'm leaving because it's Friday and I want to leave at 3:45 because I'll beat the traffic and I'll have a longer weekend. Now, she was deliberately doing that so other people could be legitimized in also, there isn't a gold star for being visibly busy. When you get to the pearly gates, oh, you were really, really busy. So what? Good for you. I mean, it is you, Geraldo, the other wonderful vets who've got, balance and meaning. It's got such an important role to play for the younger generation where, we all know that the gender profile of the vet profession is completely transformed. So young women who want to have a family and children think, and being a vet is for me. Not, oh gosh, well, if I want to have kids, I can't be a vet. How ridiculous is that? But if that's the only thing that they've seen, and again, back to the conference in America, is we got into some wonderful conversations where people were going, my goodness, it really opened their minds. You go, yes, we need to start saying to those people, not suck it up and work 15-hour days and, I'm going to think it's really clever that you never take your holidays and you work all weekends. I'm going to say that's not clever. And you can be, you can have a career in this profession and have a life that you find meaningful. And I used to work in the advertising industry, and there's nothing wrong with the advertising industry, but I would look at the people who've made it to the very top, global CEOs, and think, I just don't want your life. Now, I don't mean that in a superior way, but as in, just for me, I don't want your life. And you go, well, okay, would I want my kids to be, the things that trainee lawyers have to go through? Again, I remind you of the 8-year-old kid down the mine. I know you can make young people work all the hours that God sends and think it's clever. I just don't think it's necessary.
Yeah.
We went through actually, when you talked about modeling and role modeling the change and changing the culture, it's a real big culture change. If what it was previously was long hours and so when I started in emergency, the hours I used to do was anywhere between 8-hour shifts to the longest I've ever done was 22.5 hours. That was straight. And it became a badge of honor to be able to pull long shifts and back it up 5 hours later and do the same thing again. And we created the culture of just, the longer you were there, the tougher you are and the more resilient you were. And this is suited for you because you can handle the pressure and you can handle the lack of sleep and still be productive. And the way well, what we had to do is part of actually staying in accordance with legislation and fatigue management is to start to roll out fatigue management policies around limiting shifts to like 12 hours or something. So 12 hours is still a really, really long time. And
yeah, I think I think there's almost a more sinister problem, and this involves real self-awareness. And I've been guilty of this in the past myself, so I'm not saying this as a saint. Is I think there's a problem with the older generation, which I include myself in that. I'm 55. Is a subconscious, or in some cases, which is very sinister, conscious attitude, which is I want them to have it as hard as me.
Mm.
Yeah. So just pretend you are that miner and you did go through holes when you were 8. Mm-hmm. Do you look at your 8-year-old daughter and son and say, I want you to do it because I had to? Or do you say, I am pleased that you're going to have it easier than me? So we've got to find it in our hearts where you go, just because you had to do a 22-hour shift and I'm very impressed, Geraldo, and well done, doesn't mean that anyone else has to. Now, you might, let's take it away from you, there might be people who had to go through the long, hard yards to earn the badge to prove that they can make it in the tough world of being a vet, that want to put other people through it as well. Have we got it in our hearts to make the next generation have a more reasonable work existence? Mm. And the shocking truth is, for some people, no, they don't. Mm. You know, I'm a lawyer and I want trainee lawyers to bloody well put up with what I had to put up with. And what we need is leaders who go, do you know what? I had to go through some stupid apprentice my employees go through. What, so they're going to have it easier than you? Yes, they are. Yeah. Well, and if that bends you out of shape, you're not a particularly nice person. But you know, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I
just
couldn't agree more.
Just because you had to do it, or the previous generation had to do it, you know, that's what progress means. You know, you go, we are evolving. You know, women want to be vets. Women want to have children. You know, men want to be more engaged with their families, not just go off and, you know. But all of those things doesn't mean that the secret to work-life balance is spending more time with your kids. If you've worked it out and what you want to do is just work harder than anyone else and make more money, that's also fine. Now, guys, has this been of any use to you? I'm sorry that it keeps on breaking out, but it's been very nice to talk to you both.
No, it's extremely useful. I could talk to you for days. We're gonna change tack. We'll stop talking about balance just for interest's sake, more about Nigel. I'm going to take a leaf out of your podcast. If anybody hasn't listened to Nigel's podcast, 5 of My Life, it's a fantastic one, very, very entertaining. Definitely makes those flights go a lot faster. And Nigel asks his guests to tell him 5 of their favorite things, and it's a book and a movie and a place and an experience. I forget the last one. Anyways, I'm going to ask you as a podcaster, what is your favorite podcast to listen to?
Well, so I'm not suggesting anyone else listens to it, but it's called Hornet Heaven.
Yeah.
And it's about it's actually done by a friend of mine, but it's about fans of a football club in England called Watford.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
And I mean, and it's the reason I think it's, you know, one of the best podcasts out there is because it's got an idea in it. Uh-huh. So many, I mean, the idea is when Watford fans die, they go to Hornet. They call the Hornets. They go to heaven, where they still follow the football team.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So what, you know, as you will know, is the world isn't short of podcasts. There are lots of podcasts. Yes, yeah. And what I'm trying to do with mine, and what Ollie is doing with Hornet Heaven, is to have an idea that there's a format. Does that make sense? So 5 of My Life, you know, if someone comes on and wants to choose a TV program rather than a film, well, they can't. Okay. If someone wants to choose 6 things rather than 5, well, they can't. Yeah. You know, it's the 5 of My Life. You know, I'd say Hornet Heaven is because that's very, very specific. There is a very, very specific idea within it that's authentic and based in love. If that makes sense. You know, he's obviously a Watford fan himself.
All right, and then the very last thing. So you've had your very successful TED Talk. Have you got any TED Talks that you love that you think people have to listen to?
Yeah, well, there's two that I like. I mean, I like lots of them, but one is how to create a movement, and it's only sort of 4 minutes long, that one, and that's about which is wonderful because I've set up a few things, in my life, the Earth Hour and the Sydney Skinny and whatever, and he talks very compellingly in this talk about how it's not the first person, i.e., me, who comes up with the idea and launches it, that matters. It's the second person. It's the followers that make it a success.
Right.
So when I came up with the Sydney Skinny, which is a naked swim that happens every year, the reason why it was such a success from year one is because after I set it up, a group of women who were running, they decided to do it and thought it was a great idea. And then they talked about it. So he deconstructs the role of Nigel versus them. Well, obviously it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't come up with the idea, but the people who are really important, a bit like we were saying about people having leadership in work-life balance, is someone come up with the idea and then the followers, the first follower is the really important person to focus on. So who is going to be that first follower in the veterinary industry that's going to actually be the shining example? The second one is make love, not porn. Have you seen that one?
No.
Well, then you should.
Well, all right. That's on the list. Okay, I think we'll let you go there, Nigel. I think you've got a taxi to catch.
I have indeed.
Thank you so very much. I think that was very useful.
And let's stay in touch, Hubert, anyway, now we've connected.
I would love to. Thank you, Nigel.
Thank you,
Have a
Nigel.
great day, guys.
Thank you. Bye then.